Hi all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Ollie and I'm slightly potty about sewing machines and sewing in general. Today's video I'm going to be telling you how to go about buying a second-hand sewing machine, and we're going to get straight into it. There's a couple of terms that you'll hear when you're in the market to buy a second-hand sewing machine, or pretty much a second-hand anything. The first, antique. This machine is a Singer 128K from 1920. Now, you haven't met this machine yet. If I lift the lid off for a minute, I'm going to be gentle because it's in a little bit of a sorry state of repair. There you go, there she is. This one, 1920s machine, she's antique. The term antique refers to anything that's 100 years old or older. The second term you'll hear is vintage. Now usually vintage is used to describe wines of a certain age, but it has been hijacked, if you like, to describe any item that is 20 years old up to 99 years old. An example of a machine that's vintage, I'm so getting kicked off the vintage sites on Facebook for this, is this one. Now if we take the lid off it for a moment. Sorry, it's back to front, hang on. This machine is a 1980s Singer Merit 2404. It's from the 1980s. It's over 20 years old. It's vintage. The third term you'll hear is retro. Now retro's got two definitions. The first definition is it's something new that's made in, I don't know, today for instance, and it's based on something from the past. Take this pattern from Simplicity for instance. This is actually from 2019 and it's a reproduction of a vintage pattern from the 1940s. So this is retro. The second definition of retro is something that is actually old. Maybe say 10, 15 or 20 years old. It doesn't qualify as being antique or vintage because it's not old enough. But it's old enough for the seller to believe that there's a value in it to someone. So it's retro. Another term that you've probably heard of is rustic. Now rustic usually refers to furniture, wooden furniture in particular, that's been slightly weathered. It's been left out in the rain a lot and it's got age to it. Sewing cabinets can sometimes be called rustic, especially if they've been used as garden art. What it basically means is they're racked off. The fourth term that you'll come into contact with when looking at buying second-hand items is the word second-hand or used. Now used or second-hand can refer to literally anything that's been owned before, even if it's a brand new sewing machine that somebody's only had for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. As soon as somebody's bought an item and they sell it on, it's second hand. Now when it comes to buying second hand, there are two different markets. There's the collector and there's the general sewist. Now a collector buying second hand is looking to add a machine to their collection. They're going to be the people that aren't necessarily concerned whether the machine works or not, or if it needs a little bit of work doing to it to get it into a working condition. The general sewist, on the other hand, is someone who's looking for a cheap alternative to a modern machine. So they're more likely to want one that's in good condition, that has all the parts, that they can sit down and sew with pretty much as soon as they get it home. The thing is, second hand doesn't necessarily mean cheap. And I know there are some people out there that say a second hand older vintage machine is a lot better for a beginner to use, but that's not necessarily true either. These machines, due to their age and general condition in some cases, can be finicky and they can be expensive to fix. An older machine from the golden days of Singer isn't likely to be any more robust or reliable than a modern day machine from your local sewing machine dealer. take this one from 1920 or even Grandma from 1912. They may not have the same problems that a modern day machine will have, but they do have their own unique set of issues. If we look at Grandma, for instance, she's a vibrating shuttle machine. Her bobbin is finicky and frustrating to actually wind. She's incredibly heavy. I mean, you seriously would not want to move this anywhere, which means you're limited to where you can put it and where you can sew. You need the space to have a treadle machine like this one. In a similar vein, although this machine here is smaller, she's nowhere near as light as a modern machine. This one is still quite hefty. You wouldn't want to drop this one on your foot. When it comes to weight and space issues, those are two of the most important things that you need to consider when you're looking at buying a second-hand machine. This one, for instance, has got hardly any weight in it at all. You could spin it around with one hand, which makes it incredibly portable, which could be an important factor if you're a bit limited on space. If you buy from a sewing machine dealer, a brand new machine is likely to come with sewing lessons for free. They want to make sure that you're happy with the machine that you've spent good money on, so they give you the backup and the support. That's not something that you're likely to get if you buy second hand. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you shouldn't buy second hand. Not at all. I mean, I've got plenty of second hand sewing machines. But what I am saying is put aside the romantic notions when you are looking at a second hand machine and see it for what it really is. It's used. The very first and most important factor that you need to consider when you're buying a second-hand sewing machine isn't what it looks like, it's what it can do. You need to make sure that sewing machine matches your sewing needs. If we look at this brother, for instance, this brother has got a straight stitch, it's got a zigzag stitch. The fact that it's got a zigzag stitch means you can do things like buttonholes. It's even got the possibility of doing some blind hemming. It's a useful, usable second-hand machine. If we compare that to a good old antique Singer 128, it only does straight stitch. You can't do buttonholes on it. There are no decorative stitches. It doesn't have a nice handy dial with numbers on to say what your tension is. You have to figure it out and mess about with the tension knob until you get the tension exactly right. If you want to do a buttonhole or a zigzag stitch, you have to get yourself some gizmos. What we've got here in this box, this weird looking contraption, is actually a zigzag attachment which fits Grandma. And basically what it does is it doesn't actually do a zigzag. It moves the needle from side to side. It actually pushes it over and then lets it come back and then pushes it over again so that it forms a zigzag. And this, wait until you see this, this is the buttonhole foot that came with Grandma. I mean, just look at that. It looks like the flight deck off the USS Enterprise. And that's what you'd need to get if you want to do buttonholes on Grandma. It works in the same way as the zigzag foot. It basically moves the needle from side to side, so it gives the impression of a zigzag. As soon as you have to start forking out on gadgets to make the machine do what you want it to do, that second-hand sewing machine is starting to get expensive. Another thing to consider when you're looking at a second-hand sewing machine is actually this bit, where the bobbin goes. This one is a front-loading machine, which means the bobbin is behind the accessory tray. Now, depending on what make and model of sewing machine you're looking at, these accessory trays are either easy to come off or they're a pain in the petit derrière, as they say. This one is one of those. And this is one of the reasons why, when you're looking at second-hand machines, you'll find that this bit, the accessories tray, is usually the bit that's missing. Because most sewists get really, really annoyed with having to take these things off every time they want to change the bobbin because it's run out. So they just leave it off and then it gets left off, so it's no longer with the machine. Anyway, the bobbin is in here, and the thing that you need to ask yourself is, do you want it to be there, or would you prefer a top loading machine? So if I get this one out of the way for a moment, we'll go back to the pink one. This is a top loading machine. The bobbin goes here. They're also called drop-in machines, drop-in bobbins, and it's a lot easier to handle because it's literally just there. You just lift it out and pop it back in and close that. So much simpler. It's little things like that that could be the difference between really ticking you off or being a doddle to use, that you need to be considering when you're looking at machines. One of the great things about second-hand machines is, because they've been around for a while, it sounds a good chance that there's quite a bit of information available about them. So do your homework. If you've seen a machine that you like, research it. Now, I don't mean go straight to the Facebook groups and say, "Oh, I've seen this great machine, it's only 20 bucks, should I go for it?" Because you're likely to get the response of, "Yeah, go for it, it's just 20 bucks, what you got to lose?" Or, "Nah, don't go for that one, it's a pile of crap." It's not very helpful, is it? So, at the very least, find out as much as you can. Find out what make it is, find out what the model is. Look at Google to see if you can find blog posts of machines like the one you're interested in actually being used by people, to see what they feel about it. Then you can go to the Facebook groups and say, "I found this fantastic Singer 66 Red Eye for 80 bucks. Is that a good price?" You're likely to get a better response because somebody's going to come back and say, "Yeah, grab it, that is a fantastic price." Because actually that is a fantastic price for a Singer 66 Red Eye, especially if it's in good condition. If you spot anything like that, let me know, because I'm actually in the market for a 66 or a Rocketeer. I'd really like a Rocketeer. Enough about me and what machines I need for my collection. There are a number of places where you can find decent second-hand machines. Top of the list, and one of the places that most people in the market for second-hand machines don't really think about, is your local sewing machine dealer. Now, the thing with dealers is they tend to get models brought back in when people are upgrading to a newer machine, so they've got trade-ins, and they sell these trade-ins on a second user systems for a reasonable price, and you'll probably find that the money that you've got to put towards a sewing machine will get you more machine for your money if you go and check out what they've got available at a dealer. Not only that, but the machines that they have in as trade-ins have usually gone through a little bit of a service to make sure that they're working, and you may find that you qualify for some free sewing lessons to go with it, which again gives you more of a bargain for the money that you've got available to spend. Other options include thrift stores, second-hand stores, junk stores, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Facebook groups. You've got yard sales, estate sales, local ads in papers. You could even put your own ad in a local paper to say that you're in the market for a second-hand machine. These two machines, I actually picked this one up from a salvage yard back in the UK and it cost me £5. This one, same kind of situation, only in the US, it was $3. So you can get them from loads of places. All you really need to bear in mind is, depending on where you get them from, might have a bearing on whether the machines actually work or not. And if it's important to you that the machine works, you probably don't want to be buying it from a salvage yard. Another place that I'm going to advise you not to buy a second-hand sewing machine from is eBay. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. The first and most important is that prices on eBay, especially for the older sewing machines, are way overinflated. The thing with eBay is that it's actually quite expensive to sell anything and make a profit on eBay. You've got final value fees, you've got listing fees, you've got special features to make your listing attractive fees, and you've got the one that most people tend to forget about, free shipping, which basically is where the seller is offering free shipping, but they've added the price of the shipping to the price of the item, which just pushes it up even higher. Another thing with eBay is you can't see the item working. You don't know if it's got all your parts that you need to be able to work it. One thing that I've seen a lot on eBay in the past is, particularly with electric machines, a seller will sell a machine and separate the foot pedal and sell that separately, so they can double their return on the item, which kind of worries me. Would they sell a second-hand car without a steering wheel? It's incredibly important to be able to see a sewing machine working, especially if you actually want to sew on it, because otherwise it's just going to be an expensive doorstop. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have a complete downer on eBay. eBay is quite useful in being able to gauge how much a sewing machine is going to be worth. Not by looking at the current listings, it isn't though. What you need to be doing is looking at the sold or completed listings to see what machines actually sold for. There's a whole world of difference between what somebody lists a machine for and the money they can actually get in for it. Which brings us neatly on to the next point when it comes to buying a second-hand sewing machine: the value. Now, this is a question that I get asked a lot. I get asked it comments on the YouTube videos, I get asked it on Facebook. What's the value of my machine? It's not actually an easy question to answer, because the value of the machine is reliant on just one thing, and it's not what the seller thinks it's worth. It's what a buyer is prepared to pay for it. There are a number of things that can affect the value of a machine. The first is its general condition, and that's not just the machine, it's the bits that come with it. This case, for instance, is what you might call rustic. It's basically seen better days, it's falling apart, it's got holes where the handle goes, and there's bits flaking off. The machine itself has got rusty bits, it doesn't actually work, it's not in working order. That's going to make a difference to the value as well. Now, there are a lot of sellers who think this machine belonged to my great granny, that means it must be worth £1,000. Yeah? No. Sorry. Who owned it? The family sentimentality that's attached to it has no bearing on the value of sewing machines at all. It's sad to say, but many older machines like this one don't have any value at all. The key to assessing what your sewing machine's actually worth is dependent on what it is, what condition it's in, and whether it's actually attractive to buyers. Now, singers tend to go for slightly more than any other brand of second-hand sewing machine. Now, when I'm talking singers, I mean the older singers. Now, the reason for that is because of the sentimentality and the romanticism that's linked to the Singer brand, because they have been around for so long. It's more than likely that somebody way back in your family owned a Singer. Having said that, even Singers have got their price limit. Let's look at Grandma for a minute. She's in fair condition. She works. She has some rust spots. She's got damage to her decals. She's got some chipping on the paintwork, which has gone straight down to the metal. Some twit in the past put a pin cushion on her arm, so she's badly scratched there. She's got knobs missing off her drawers. The table itself is a little bit rustic in places. She's a little bit rickety. I picked her up for £80, and the condition that she's in, that's what she's worth. I wouldn't have paid any more than that. If she was in slightly better condition, if her decals were a little bit more intact, if the shellac or the lacquer on the base was in tip-top condition, you'd probably be looking at somewhere in the region of between $150 to $200 because she's a treadle. Now if she was mint, if everything was pristine and immaculate and she'd still got all her paintwork intact down on the treadle working parts, you could probably push that value up to maybe 250 to 300, but that's it. That's the limit. Now you can find treadle machines or hand crank machines that are on the market for more than $300, and if you like the machine, if it's one that you really want for your collection and you're prepared to pay that price and you're happy with it, then go for it by all means. All I'm saying is take into consideration the condition of the machine, the make of the machine, and bear in mind that this 27 and this 128 are probably amongst the most prolific sewing machines that are available on the second-hand market at the moment. And the more machines that you get that are like these, the less they're worth, because obviously even if the demand's there, there are so many machines available that the demand's never going to outstrip the availability, if you see what I mean, and that does have an effect on the price. So let's recap on what affects the value of second-hand sewing machines. The availability and popularity of the model. Obviously, if you've got something like a Singer Featherweight, you can expect to pay slightly more for it than you would for a Singer 128, because the featherweights are slightly more popular. You're looking at the age of and general condition of the sewing machine. One in the condition that this one is in, with the state of the case, isn't going to be worth as much as something that is in mint condition. Another thing that you need to look at, does it work? If you're looking for a second-hand machine that you can actually use to sew, then the fact that it works is going to make it more valuable to you. You need to look at the availability of parts. How much is it going to cost you to get a machine like this back into full working order? What is it missing? What parts do you have to replace? The cost of what you need to buy to get something like this into working condition is going to affect the price, because whatever you pay for that machine, say it's, I don't know, 10 bucks, 20 bucks, if it's going to cost you 60 bucks to put it right, you've suddenly got a very expensive machine. And by that, what I mean is you could just take your 80 bucks and buy a machine that works. Save yourself the hassle. Remember what I said at the start of this video, leave the romantics out of it and make sure you get a machine that's going to work for you. What it looks like isn't as important as the functions that it's got on it and whether you can make it work in your sewing room or area. When you found the machine that you're interested in, you're thinking about buying, there are a couple of things that you need to make sure that you check for. The first, depending on the age of the machine, you need to make sure that the parts that you need for it to work are readily available. Now by parts, what I'm talking about is the foot pedal, the bobbins, you might need spare bobbins for it. You're looking at needles. Some sewing machines, depending on their age, use needles that just aren't available widely anymore. They're difficult to get hold of, or you might not be able to get hold of them. If you've got a sewing machine you can't use because you can't get the needles for it, yeah, we're back to the doorstop scenario, or maybe garden art. There's one very important book that you need for any sewing machine, and that's the manual. Make sure that the machine that you're interested in has got a manual available. Now there is a place that you can download them from for free online. I'll put a link in the description box below for you, or you could even contact the manufacturer to see if they've got a manual for it. You'll be amazed how many manuals the manufacturers keep a hold of for even the older models. The next thing that you want to double check is it's actually got the features that you need for your sewing adventures. There's no point getting a Singer Featherweight that only does straight stitch if what you actually want is something that's capable of doing buttonholes or zigzag or decorative stitches, bear that in mind. Featherweights might be cute and they might be really tiny and really portable, but what they're actually able to do for the price that you have to pay to get one can be very restrictive. Regardless of the age of the machine, make sure that you get to see it working. Now that is in particular importance if you're intending to take the machine home and sew with it straight away. See it at a place, particularly if it's electric, see it in a place that's got a power socket that you can plug it into and actually see it work. And when you see it in action, listen to the noise that it makes as it sews. If there's any kind of weird knocking or strange rubbing noise, or makes a noise sounding like it's just about to croak, walk away, don't go for it. Unless you're prepared to take it on as a project to do it up, there are plenty of second-hand sewing machines on the market, more than enough to make sure you get one that can actually sew straight out of the box, even if it hasn't got a box. You know what I mean. If at all possible, make sure you take some fabric with you, so that when you've got the sewing machine up and running, you can put the fabric underneath, let the machine pull the fabric through, don't hold on to it, just let it go through. And what you're doing by letting it do that is making sure that the feed dogs work, because if your feed dogs don't pull your fabric through, you're going to be doing an awful lot of pushing and shoving, and you don't need that. We've looked at the things that you need to watch out for, and now we're going to look at some of the things that you need to avoid. This is one of my favourites. The top #1 sewing machine that you need to avoid is anything with a picture that is literally just a box, or anything that's a picture of a box that says "Here in box, we'll deliver." If you want to buy a sewing machine in a box that's sealed, never been opened, this one isn't. This is my Singer Simple. This one's been opened. Demonstration purposes only. If you want your Singer sewing machine or any kind of sewing machine to come in a box, buy it from a store. If you get it from a store, not only will you get the box, but you'll also get a receipt. You'll get a chance for a refund if there's anything wrong with the machine that's in the box. And a bit of a bonus, buying it from a store, you may actually find you get a machine in the box and it'll have all the parts that are supposed to come with it, and it'll come with a warranty. Avoid at all costs any machine that's got parts missing, like the accessories tray for instance, or the bobbin case, the bobbin, or even the bobbin housing where it sits. There are so many bobbin housing combinations out there that if any part of that is missing, you are going to have a headache trying to work out which bobbin, which house, which case fits what machine. Second-hand sewing machines are 10 a penny. There are so many out there, there is no reason why you should want to buy one that's got anything missing. And my biggest pet peeve of all, don't buy a sewing machine that doesn't have either a foot control or a knee lever, so that you can actually get the thing working when you get it home. There is no point. You may as well buy a car without a steering wheel. Now, the one thing that I see a lot of, on Facebook in particular, is a picture of a sewing machine like that. Now this sewing machine is actually back to front. What you're looking at is the rear side of the sewing machine. Now, if you see a picture like that, what it tells you instantly is the seller wouldn't know a sewing machine from a dishwasher, which could be a bad thing because A, they won't know anything about it, they won't know if there's any parts missing, they won't know if it works. Worse than that is you're not going to know what it is, because even the best of us who eat, live, drink, breathe sewing machines wouldn't be able to tell exactly what machine it was with just that as a picture. Another situation that you might see is a picture of a sewing machine cabinet. Same thing. What they've done is they've taken a picture of the cabinet with the lid closed and they've said that there's a sewing machine inside it, but they haven't said what the sewing machine is. Going back to the car scenario, it's a bit like trying to sell a car while it's still in the garage and the door's shut. Of course, the other side of that scenario is the fact that if the seller doesn't know what it is they've got, you're more likely to get a bargain. When you find the machine of your dreams, and just before you part with your hard-earned cash, ask some questions of yourself and of the seller. Ask the seller how long they've owned the machine for and why they're selling it. How well has it been used? And by that what I mean is how many hours of continual use it's had. Domestic sewing machines, remember, aren't designed to work 24/7. Their motors, particularly electric motors, aren't able to withstand that kind of punishment. Find out what kind of sewing the seller did. Did they do heavy sewing? Did they make a lot of bags? Have they used a lot of canvas? Have they found it difficult to get sewing machine needles or bobbin replacements, particularly on some of the older vintage machines? Have they got a manual that they can give you with the machine? If not, how easy is it to find a manual online? And if any seller says to you that they've never taken the machine out of the box, or well, I've only had it out of the box once, maybe twice, triple it. Better still, quadruple it, because you can guarantee whatever the seller has said is probably a little bit of an underestimate, and it's probably not a conscious underestimate. They probably can't remember how often or how many times they've used it, so it's not a fault on the seller, it's just human memory. The other thing to consider is however many times that they've taken it out and used it, what did they use it for? There's a whole world of difference between using a machine twice just to sew the odd seam on a dress or a pair of pants, or sewing 30 pairs of jeans in 2 days. Whatever they've used it for, particularly with electric again, could have a devastating effect on the motor, and you could be faced with having to replace it, or worse still, that sewing machine that you've just spent your budget on not lasting as long as you'd hoped. So all of those little things, those are things that you need to consider when looking at a second-hand machine. I hope you liked today's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I hope it's encouraged you to go out and find a second-hand sewing machine. There are some brilliant, good quality ones out there, and now that you know what to look for, hopefully you'll be able to find one that will suit your needs. Why not check out some of my other videos? There's a couple of links that will be coming up around here any minute now. Subscribe to my channel and ring that bell, and YouTube will let you know when I upload another video. Whichever one that you go and check out next, I hope to see you back here for the next one. In the meantime, wherever you're sewing, whatever you're sewing with, embrace your creativity and have fun. Thank you ever so much for watching. Bye for now.